Good evening. I think we're bang on time, everyone. Welcome. I will take the first item straight away. There are no public online at the moment, so I'll take the first item straight away, which are apologies. And I only have one, and that was from our independent advisor, Rob Bennett. That's the only apology I have, because I think we're all present and correct anyway. So thank you all. Declarations of interest, any of those to be made at this time? Yes, Councillor Bennett.
I'm not sure if I have to make a declaration if we're no longer having the item, but I was going to declare that I was a member of the Planning Transformation Committee.
No, thank you for that. I think that's useful anyway to say that, so that's fine. Any others? But as you all know, you can declare any interest if you decide that you've changed your mind on a particular item as we go along, so there's no issue with that. Minutes of the previous meeting, is everybody happy with those? Any amendments, any comments, anything to add, take away? Silence assumes assent. In that case, I will sign them. Public questions, we have no public either online or in the chamber. So that takes us very sharply to, as you would expect, to item 5. So I will read, I don't really generally read, but I will read this one. I'd like to propose that we defer this item so that it can be included in the reports and items that are proposed to come to meeting on the 4th of March. However, we do have Mr. Kelly online who is prepared to, and I'm quite happy, if people have got some questions they'd like to ask him, or if you've got any comments to make on this item, that's fine. So I'm not going to say we're just going to skirt over this item and say nothing. If anybody's got something they want to say now, I'm okay with that. Stephen will be here to answer any relevant questions. But what we're not going to do, and it won't be decision making, we're not going to go through the vote, we're not going to particularly go through all the recommendations, we're going to do that on the 4th of March. And the reason I've done that is, extraordinarily rarely for me, is that I don't believe that all members have had a chance to actually scrutinise these 49 changes and to be able to discuss it between themselves and with their relevant groups, and to be able to come to this committee fully armed with the information they need to make a value judgment. So that's the way I felt about it. And so I hope members can appreciate that those were the reasons. So if I can ask politely if everybody's in agreement with that, and then please you can speak on this item. Councillor Young.
Thank you for that explanation. That answered my first question. I just wondered how this affects the progress of the governance changes that we're doing.
I wasn't asking that, but...
So these proposals from the planning reviews that have been going on will be incorporated into the new constitution. So that's why I was going through, because planning had their own sort of review going on sort of concurrently with our governance review. So the proposal would have been to include these changes if members had agreed it through here and full council into the new constitution.
No, I understand that. I'm asking whether the delay is going to affect that.
No.
I mean, it's a good question, and I obviously did ask that, what were the ramifications of doing this? I did consider it, so it's extraordinarily unusual for me. I've never messed around with the agenda before, but I really thought this was important, and we're going to bring it to the next Civic Affairs, which will be on the 4th of March, and so I was assured that we were okay for time to be able to do that, so there should be no other knock-on effects. So are members content that we do that? Is there any opposition to that? Okay, thank you very much, members. So are there any questions, anything you'd like to say on this item? Councillor Bennett.
This is just a quick one, but the only query I've had from my group is on ward councillors' speaking rights and restricting the time. And I don't mind whether we get an answer now or on the 4th March, but I think we'd like a bit more detail on how it's going to work, particularly when more than one ward councillor is speaking. That's really the only thing I wanted to raise.
Yeah, I think that was one of the main points as well, that I think people needed to go away and see how they felt about that and speak to their groups and speak to other members. And that was one of the key points. I've got a number of others here, but that was one of them. So yes, that will be. There's no reason why you can't come back and have your input and do all that. And that's why I wanted to give people more time to get around that. Jenny, sorry.
Yeah, I've made quite a few notes, but one of the key things I think is transparency. The transparency for the public. I have concerns about restricting councillor speaking time. I'm certainly not averse to some restriction, but to restrict to 3 minutes is very tight. What I would like to avoid is councillors just reading out a report that's been produced by a consultant that's part of the documents. Everybody who's on the committee should have read those, as long as it's been, submitted in good time. So some restriction, but not to 3 minutes. And there are some worries I know about, not being able to call in a councillor from another area to speak against or on behalf of an application. I was a bit surprised that CJAC's been it was removed, but my understanding was it has been resurrected. So yes, the delegation, speaking times, those are my concerns at the moment. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Kelly? Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah. It's very quick, not an objection, but just a question. In a scenario, Councillor Gawthorpe would alluded to situations where an application is being called in by a councillor from another ward, and I can see a sort of a good faith scenario where that could happen. Is it maybe if a ward councillor lived close to the border and an application was affecting neighbours and therefore just happened to have good close knowledge in order to be able to give the planning reasons which officers quite rightly insist upon having before they accept a call in. Would the protocol, are we envisaging a protocol of the ward councillor in question would in that case approach one of the ward councillors and simply relay it? And could there be, should there be sort of built in some kind of guidance around that, so that if there is going to be that rule, and I share Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood's concerns about it, but if that is going to be there, would the idea be that you would always have the right to request whoever is a ward councillor to do that call in on your behalf? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kelly will answer these questions a lot better than I do, but I'll give my understanding of it, and that isn't what it meant. I don't think that's what it means, but however, I may be wrong, but Mr. Kelly will answer that. Jenny, please.
Just one more question, and that is about relying on conditions, the reliance on and use of conditions. They're going to have to be worded very well and very tightly. I put down something here about a timing issue, but I don't think that quite makes sense. But it's 10.2 page, I think page 57, where you start talking about the, oh no, that's delegation. Anyway, yeah, the key thing is, you know, how that conditions and the reliance on it may cause some problems, and also transparency for the public again. Thank you.
Any other questions for the officer? Going once, going twice? Mr. Kelly, may I go to you?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, that's loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Yes, excellent. I think there's a few questions in there. But as you highlighted, Chair, I think members wanted to discuss some of these things further. We can make provision. It's perfectly possible to make provision for longer speaking times, but I think that's an area for discussion that members want to have before we settle on something. The point around the alternate ward, a neighbouring ward member being able to call something in the ward, in a neighbouring ward, I think I'd probably want to take away. I absolutely hear the point and the concern, and perhaps clarify when we come back to discuss it, or indeed can clarify through the minutes of this meeting what the position is. But as you've highlighted, I think some members want to discuss this further before settling on a particular conclusion. So the objective really, I suppose, is to try and manage and make sure that what we don't have is ward members calling in neighbouring developments in neighbouring wards without the support, or indeed without the understanding of the ward member themselves. But perhaps that's something that if people want to suggest comments on, we're happy to look at further.
Mr. Leader.
Can I just clarify, Stephen, if, for example, without wishing to be too contentious, the Beehive Centre was due subject to a planning application, which neighbours my ward and is part of Naomi's, would I therefore not be able to call it in?
Through you, Chair, I don't think that was the objective. Certainly, and that's why I want to probably look at the drafting and hear people's views. But one of the, I suppose, one of the issues that we're trying to ensure is that if there is a call in from a neighbouring ward, potentially without the knowledge of the ward member whose ward it is, or indeed without at least a degree of understanding or engagement about why it's being called in, there's a way of trying to manage that. I could foresee an example, for example, where a small scheme in the middle of a neighbouring ward was called in by another ward member. It wouldn't be, picking up Councillor Gawthorpe-Wood's point about transparency, it wouldn't be entirely clear why a ward councillor would be participating effectively in calling that matter in. But where these large strategic schemes, and we recognise there are circumstances where the ward boundaries, the impacts of these larger schemes may well impact surrounding wards as well. I don't see a problem, which is why I'm more than happy to take away that point and look at the drafting before we come back again.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions at this time? Councillor Bennett.
This is more a quick suggestion as to whether it's possible to have an all-member briefing on this point before 4th of March, because otherwise those of us who are on this committee or who are on the transformation planning committee are worried about sort of Chinese whispers, in that if we're repeating our understanding of the changes to members rather than them having a chance to put questions direct, we might just confuse things and create concern where there is no actual concern underneath. But I realise we've got 4th March is not far away and we all have a lot of commitments, but I think if it's possible to have a session for everybody, I think that would be good.
I don't know how realistic that is time-wise. I'd have to ask Dan and Mr. Kelly what you feel about that, if that's possible to do. It sounds like a good idea to me. You're on mute, Stephen.
Sorry, Chair. We'd be very keen to try and find a way of helping everyone to understand what the measures were. So perhaps if I work with Dan and we see whether there is something, possibly with members' very busy calendars, we won't get everybody, but let's see what we can potentially provide, because there's most definitely not an attempt to try and slide these changes in without members' understanding, and we very much feel that it will be improved by members' contribution. So I'll see if I can work with Dan tomorrow morning and see what may be possible.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a very useful suggestion, and we'll come back to members on how that pans out. But I appreciate that not everybody will be able to get there, but at least it shows a a willingness to be able to put these points across. And even though obviously everybody can't come, but then if representatives from each group are there, then the story can go back to their groups via their various group meetings. Thank you ever so much for that. Is there anything else for Mr. Kelly, or can he go back to his tea and biscuits? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much, Stephen. That's very good of you to join us, but at least you didn't have to drive from Northampton, so we got that sorted.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Thank you very much. Bye. So that takes us swiftly to item 6, and we do have an extra item after that. We do have a quick item 7, but that's why Jodie's here. So we're going to go directly to item 6. So, and Lindsay, can you hear us?
I can, Chair, thank you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. So I'll leave this one to you because I suggest you're far more qualified than me to speak.
I'll do my best. Thank you very much. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lindsay Fulcher. I'm the Head of People here at the City Council. So the following items brought to you as part of our requirement under the Local Government Transparency Code. For those of you that have been on this committee a while, you will recognise this report. The pay policy statement is an annual statement that we need to have approved by Council at the end of each financial year. There are standard things on here that you will see year on year. There are certain calculations and ratios that we need to report on, and you'll see in the appendix that we've also got outlined in here our approach to senior officer salaries, pay awards and other pay terms and conditions of employment. The two changes that I am highlighting and bringing to you as recommendations today are in section 1. The first is that we increase the Cambridge weighting supplement. This is a supplement that we pay to the lowest pay points within our organisation. So those staff that are paid on our band 1 receive a supplement. It's currently at £12.50 an hour, but the real living wage is £12.60 an hour. So in effect, we don't pay anything at the moment for Cambridge weighting. So the proposal is to increase that to £13 per hour, and that'll be from the 1st of April. And the second recommendation I've outlined today is that we remove the qualifying criteria for our agency workers who receive the real living wage. So at the moment, as a real living wage employer, we pay the real living wage rates, which are, as I say, at the moment, £12.60 an hour. We pay those to agency staff that work with us for a period of 4 weeks or more, continuous period of 4 weeks. I don't know, to be honest with you. I haven't got the history around why the 4-week qualifying period has been put in place. We have very few workers who are paid on this rate. And to be honest with you, it causes a lot of unnecessary administration in reviewing how long people have been with us. And it feels fair to be able to pay them in line with other staff that we directly employ. So the recommendation today is to remove that 4-week qualifying criteria. So my ask today is if you could consider these recommendations and recommend the report to full council later on this month, please.
Thank you very much for that, Lindsay. Are there any questions? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. Yes, this is quite interesting. Can you tell us what we do when the Real Living Wage Foundation increases its rate of pay? Do we immediately follow that, or do we wait until the end of the financial year?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to answer that. We tend to pay this from November, the real living wage rates. So the real living wage start their negotiations and consider the pay increases normally around September. It's normally October time that we hear from the real living wage with the confirmed rates. As a real living wage employer, we have 6 months in which to pay the new rates, but we've always taken the approach historically that we will pay it from the November. So real living wage increases come in from November, and then the Cambridge weighting increases from the April.
One other question. There is the national living wage has a lower rate for people working under 20, age 20. I don't see any mention of that here. Do we ignore that, or what do we do?
we tend to pay the real living wage and Cambridge weighting rates, to be honest. We have very few, to be honest, that's something we're looking at trying to increase anyway, but very few employees that are under that age range. However, we would bring them in on either the Cambridge weighting or the real living wage rates, or obviously whatever rates appropriate to the role that they're undertaking at that time.
Yes, I'm sure we have enough trouble recruiting without having that burden to thrust upon them. Thank you, that's helpful. Thanks very much.
Councillor Bennett.
This is more of an information point and a suggestion, which is I know from my day job that a lot of smaller employers who don't have the spare time to go through real living wage employer registration do actually follow the Cambridge City Council living wage, because it saves them all the trouble of doing their own surveys. And I just wondered what can we do to make it easier for those smaller businesses to find our living wage information? Could we put something on the website in the businesses section and maybe have a press release if it gets approved at full council? Because I think that would be really, really helpful.
Yes, I think, Councillor Bennett, that's a fantastic idea. We've done a lot of work in the last 12 months to increase the transparency of our pay, to make it easier for both its staff that are already with us to understand what their pay rates are and how our pay policies apply to them, but also externally to promote ourselves as an employer and an employer in the city. And I think that's a really good idea. I can work with the communications team, get a press release out if that's something that committee would be happy to endorse.
That sounds like an excellent idea. Second excellent idea from Councillor Bennett today. Are there any other questions for the officer? Going once? Going twice? In that case, members, then our agenda item 6, page 129, recommendations are 1.1. Are you happy to take them all en bloc, or would you like to do them separately? Thank you so much. All those in favour of the officer's recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lindsay. You can go back to your coffee and biscuits now.
Thank you.
Members, we have a short item number 7, and Jodie's kindly turned up to give us an update, give us an audit update as to where we are now and I guess why we're there. So he's come in to do that because we considered that was the best way forward at the moment, and he's far better to explain it, why we're doing it now, than I am. Jodie, can I ask you to just carry on?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, and apologies for this coming as a late item. It is clearly a fast-moving position, and I was keen to give the committee an update. So there are no written recommendations, but with the Chair's indulgence, I would just like to recommend that the committee note the update formally following. Once I've given it, please. So as the committee will be aware, following several years of delays to the publication and audit of the statements of accounts across the local government sector in England, the government's recently announced a reset and recovery approach to addressing the substantial audit backlog across the country. As part of this approach, the government has set a series of statutory backstop dates by which audited accounts must be published. Historically, this council has a good track record in terms of timeliness of its accounts. In both 2020 to 21 and 21-22, we were amongst the 9% and 12% respectively of English authorities whose audited accounts were published on time. For 22-23, we published our draft unaudited accounts on the 22nd of June 2023, which was 22 days after the deadline for draft accounts. However, due to the pressures in the wider local audit sector, our auditors were unable to find the resource to audit these over a period of almost 18 months. As a result, in line with the government's new reset and recovery approach, these accounts were signed off on the 5th of December 2024 with a disclaimed opinion. This essentially means that the auditors were unable to issue an opinion on whether or not the accounts were true and fair, and the reason given for this in the auditor's report was that the auditor did not have the required resources available to complete their detailed audit procedures. It was necessary to do this to ensure that the audited accounts could be published by the statutory backstop date of 13th of December, as set out by the government. The next backstop date for the 23-24 accounts is the 28th of February 2025. However, the council has unfortunately not yet been able to publish draft accounts for 23-24. This is primarily due to acute resource pressures within the finance team over the past 12 months, including 2 key vacancies within the technical accounting team who would usually carry out accounts preparation work. Whilst we were able to recruit an interim into one of these vacancies, we were unable to fill the other despite significant efforts to do so. We did appoint an interim specifically to work on the 23-24 accounts in late summer when it became apparent that there was insufficient capacity within the existing team. And we did make a great deal of progress, but unfortunately the interim had to leave the council at short notice for personal reasons, and we did not manage to replace them. Under the accounts and audit regulations, before accounts can be signed off by the auditors, even with a disclaimed opinion, there needs to be a 6-week public inspection period. This means that, unfortunately, even if we were to publish the accounts today, there is no longer sufficient time available to meet the next statutory backstop date of the 28th of February. The implication of this is that we are required to publish an explanation for not meeting the backstop date and to send this to the Secretary of State. The government intends to publish a list of bodies and auditors that do not meet the backstop dates, which will make clear where unaudited accounts were not published in time and to keep the issue of further consequences under close review. Moving forwards, I'm pleased to report significant progress in dealing with the temporary resourcing issues which have plagued the team over the past 12 months. We now have a key experienced member of the team back from long-term leave and focus full-time on producing the draft accounts as quickly as possible, while still ensuring, of course, that these present a true and fair view. In addition, I'm interviewing for the key post of Head of Finance this week and hope to be able to make an appointment soon. As things currently stand, we are reasonably confident that we should be able to publish draft 23-24 accounts by the end of February. Whilst this will not allow the backstop date to be met due to the 6-week mandatory public inspection period, I hope it will at least provide some assurance to this committee, full council, our auditors and the public that we are focused on this issue and progress is being made in getting us back on track. Should there be any change to this position, I will of course provide further updates to the committee, and as always, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions on that, members? Councillor Robertson, I thought you might.
Well, it's personally, partly to thank Jody for doing what he can. He's obviously had his hands tied behind his back without the staff to do the work over the last few months. Maybe you're now back in, you've got all the stuff you need apart from this one post. Good. Can you just clarify, if the accounts were ready, are they actually going to get audited this year? I thought it was another year when we weren't going to get a full audit. Am I wrong about that?
Thank you. Yes, so the accounts, we will get, when we do eventually publish them, it will be a disclaimed opinion again. So no, the auditors have already said they won't be looking to carry out a full audit. It will be another year of disclaimed opinion. And then there will be an assurance rebuilding process, which will be the same nationally from 24-25 onwards. So clearly, under normal circumstances, auditors take some assurance over the opening balances in the accounts from their previous audit work in previous years. So clearly, where that work hasn't happened, in the first year where they do then seek to carry out a full audit, they're not going to have assurance over the opening balances. So there will be a tail, if you like, of qualified audit opinions whilst they rebuild that assurance. But that process will be mirrored at all councils across the country where there has been a disclaimed opinion, which is going to be the vast majority at one point or another.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
I just want to express our sympathy to Jody and Isabel and the rest of the team who have been stuck on the sticky end of a very poor decision from the ministry, which no accountant I have ever met understands or supports. And I'm really sorry that you're in this position. We really appreciate everything you're doing to try and get us out of it.
Any other questions, comments from anybody? In that case, I will also echo that, Jody, and for actually turning up today, sorry, I have to look around the screen, and for turning up today to explain to members where we are and why we're there, because unless you're in that world, it can get quite complex to quite understand what's going on. So, and from what I understand there, if we're going to be able to produce accounts for the 28th of February, then we are fulfilling our obligations. It's just procedurally. So we're going to be not meeting that backstop procedurally, but actually the accounts will be there. So I think that's a sterling effort.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, obviously the requirement in statute is to produce audited accounts, so we won't be publishing audited accounts. They will be unaudited at that point.
Yeah, I understood that. So perhaps I didn't express myself quite enough, but for you to get to that position, having waded through all this treacle, I think is absolutely amazing. So thank you for that and for turning up today. Councillor Young.
Can you explain perhaps why it's been so difficult to recruit?
I think, you know, there are quite significant issues in the local government finance market at the moment. There's just a real shortage of resource. Everybody, you know, the number of councils that are dealing with a backlog, everybody's kind of scrabbling around for the same year-end technical resource, and there's just a limited number of people out there with the knowledge and experience to do this sort of work. So it's just been really tricky. We don't, as a general rule, we're not a council that relies on temporary resource in the finance team routinely. Some councils will sort of routinely bring additional people in at year end. We don't normally do that because we normally have enough capacity within the existing team. So, you know, I think in some ways that's made it a bit harder as well, because there will be interims out there that kind of have their routine that go to the same councils each year. You know, we don't really have any. So, you know, it's been a challenge, but as I say, we've got our main technical accountant back now, which is great. Hopefully I'll be making an appointment to the Deputy 151 position within the coming weeks. You know, and that should really help to get us back on track.
Good luck with that.
No other questions, statements? Thank you so much. Jodie, thank you again so much for turning up and for giving us that briefing. Well, members, that in fact concludes the business today, unless I've forgotten something. Oh, yes, yeah, you want us to, a recommendation to note that we've heard that report and understood it. Yes, of course, I'm sorry. Yeah, can all members who agree with that recommendation? Mr. Leader?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, but it's unanimous from the committee.
Thank you. It's just to recognise the report, and we've received that report as Jodie requested. So, good, that way it gets minuted properly. Yeah. My apologies for that. In that case, members, the business of the day is now concluded, so you may all retire. Thank you ever so much. Have a safe journey home.